Okay, y'all, about time for class, I think. There's the bell. All right. All right, well, welcome back. Good to see everybody tonight. Tonight we're going to be back in Esther, chapter 5. Let's go ahead and do a quick recap of what happened in chapter 4. Anybody want to hit the highlights for us? Anybody remember? You can just shout it out or raise your hand and Mike will bring you the mic. Mike will bring the mic. Anybody? What's going on in chapter 4? Well, to Esther, yeah. Mordecai is, if y'all will recall, he's out at the city gate and he's in sackcloth and ashes, right? He's wailing and crying out there, and it gets back to Esther that he's out there making a scene, and she doesn't know what's going on yet. So she sends her servant out to see what the deal is, and so we get this kind of back and forth here between Esther and Mordecai about what's going on, and he gives the full report, doesn't he? Gives her a copy of the decree that was just made, so she can kind of know what's going on. And how does she respond to that? She hears of the plot, she sees this decree, and Mordecai asks her to do what? Go before the king, and she's a bit apprehensive about it. Why? Exactly. And to appear before the king unsummoned, that's it, yeah. Unless he did what? That's right. The, saving grace would be him extending his scepter to her, and then she could go before the king without being immediately killed. So, what does Mordecai respond to her? She says, "You know that I could be killed for this." What's his response to that? Right. Yes, we have the famous quoted verse here. But yeah, he responds to her that even though she is the queen, that she's not going to escape the killing. Right. She would probably be found out, and she would suffer the same fate. He also, being a Jew, he would almost certainly know that the numerous stories of deliverance throughout Jewish history, I guess, telling her that help will arise from somewhere, if not from her. The insinuation being that even though he's not mentioned here, God is going to give them deliverance. At least that's my opinion. Yeah.
Struck me. Whoa, I didn't. There, sorry. Something that struck me going through it is because of the way they communicated, there were folks of this world that were able to collaborate. I think this is the correct word, or cooperate. I don't know the proper word of their story, their faith. The virgins prayed with her, and then the eunuch was relaying between Mordecai. So just a small. God didn't need the help, but for historical purposes, there were others outside of the Jewish faith that could account, and I just walked away with that little
That's
tidbit.
interesting. Yeah, all those kind of the supporting cast that is involved. It's not just people from Jewish history. It's her servants, the eunuchs, the whatnot. Yes, that's pretty interesting. Like Brian said, there's the famous verse, "Who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" You hear that in a lot of sermons. Definitely an applicable verse to numerous topics we could talk about today. It ends with Esther asking Mordecai what? Yeah, I didn't hear what you said. Right. She agrees to go before the king, but she says she's going to do what first? Right. They're going to fast for 3 days, and she asks Mordecai to assemble all the Jews in the city to do the same. Yeah.
Of Esther, and one of the criticism is that God is not mentioned. But in verses 14 and 16, these are two that indirectly, in 16 is pretty directly references to God. Number one, who knows if you've been chosen royalty in order to deliver the Jews, which in fact he did. And secondly, fasting is always associated with prayer to God. It's always associated with seeking victory. It's a sign of humility before God as you're approaching him. So that's and it's repeated over and over again in both. Well, let me put this: it's just a tradition in both the New Testament and the Old Testament. Jesus speaks of it. Jesus fasted and prayed. So, for what it's worth, I think it adds to indications of canonicity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it doesn't mention God directly, but we get pretty close to him right there, fasting and whatnot. Something that was traditionally associated with prayer and worship of God. Are there any major things that stick out to you in this chapter? Anything maybe since Sundays that you've thought about it a little bit that kind of pop up in your mind?
We as Christians today fall back on that a lot, or we should be. When we come into difficult circumstances that we feel like, I'm not worthy, I don't need to be doing this, somebody else would be better at it. This type of situation always rings back to me that how do you know God didn't put you in this situation just for this situation? We had a situation at my previous church that I hadn't been an elder up there for a month maybe, and there was a situation that came up was just horrible that I've got right in the middle of, and I've told myself many times and told the person many times that I think really this is why I became an elder, was for this particular instance right here. God works with us if we allow him to do it.
Absolutely. And we see, almost countless instances of that throughout the Bible. Moses, he was chosen, and he really wasn't the eloquent speaker. He didn't feel that he was the guy for the job. Joseph, David, the youngest little shepherd boy. Just another example. So, great point. Thank you. I think it's also interesting that Esther appears to be completely ignorant of what has transpired. This huge decree that's going to wipe out millions of people, and she doesn't have any idea why Mordecai would be upset and wailing in the gate. I guess it just kind of goes to show how insulated the royalty was from the common man in that empire. All right. Well, that's a good recap of chapter 4. Unless anybody else has any other comments or ideas, let's jump into chapter 5 here. I'm going to go ahead and read the first 4 verses of it. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room, opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you even to half of my kingdom." And Esther said, "If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king." All right. So, the fast is over on the 3rd day, and she puts on the fancy duds and heads out to potentially face her doom. And moment of truth, and she stands in the courtyard just outside the entrance to the throne room. The description here is kind of ambiguous, but another thing maybe that would go towards Esther being a legit historical source, when they did the archaeology of the palace in Susa, they found the throne room to be pretty much exactly as described in the book. So just a kind of a cool aside there. But anyway, he likes what he sees. He holds the scepter out to her. I guess it was kind of an official thing. Like if he holds the scepter out, you have to go acknowledge king, kind of like kissing the ring or something like that. Just acknowledging that he was the king and above everyone, and that his decision was final. How long had it been since he had seen her? Y'all remember? Yeah, 33 days now. Yeah, this is the 33rd day. The 30 days and then the 3-day fast. So, what does he give her? What did he tell her she could have? Wow, half his kingdom. Okay. Is he being literal here, or is this just an expression? What do y'all think? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be willing necessarily to, hand over the reins to half of the empire. But I kind of think this is an expression. I don't know for sure, but knowing Xerxes and who he was, I would kind of bet that this is probably not a literal. You can have half of my stuff. It's actually sort of a common thing with rulers back then, though, to give pretty incredible gifts to those that pleased them. When you're the most powerful man in the world, you can give the best gifts. Kind of a status symbol, I think. Look how great and benevolent I am, and just kind of a demonstration of his power as well. Sure, yeah, he was just so in love with her that, yeah, if you want to believe that, you go right ahead. Yeah, it could be. Let's see here. It could be a little bit of ego too, couldn't it? Xerxes was a kind of an egotistical guy, right? So being able to offer the greatest gift would be kind of a self-indulgent kind of thing. Could be. Yeah.
Royal hyperbole and refers over to Mark chapter 6.
Herod?
When it's talking about, but an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles, the military commanders, and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came in and the need, she pleased Herod and his guest, and the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it to you." And he vowed to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you, up to half of the kingdom." So evidently that was kind of a
what did she
kind
ask
of a
for?
thing. I'll give you whatever you want. It's that type of thing.
That's right. John the Baptist's head. That's right. Yeah, I was going to refer to that. Absolutely. This isn't the only case in the Bible where we see a leader doing something like this, making a grand gesture. There, it kind of came back to bite Herod because he didn't really want to do it. But
Daughter, and she danced for him. That I'll give you whatever you want.
yeah,
She chose John's head.
right. Boy, I can't imagine choosing that when you could have so much more. But yeah, that's where we see it in the New Testament, Mark 6. That could be another way of just keeping the population in check, wanting them to realize like, hey, if I please the king like this other person has, then maybe he'll reward me too. So it could be a kind of a way of controlling the rebellious and whatnot. So anyway, so Esther, she's won, right? This is it. He's given her anything she could ask for. It's hers. What does she ask for? Cancel the genocide, right? Or kill that dirtbag Haman. What? She asked for a banquet. I mean, come on. What do y'all think about that? Okay. It's kind of perplexing to me, but of course, we see how it works out. But wouldn't have been my first instinct to ask the guy that has just orchestrated this mass killing of your people to have him come to dinner with you and the king. But we see.
Originally, that she could ask for anything and the king would give it to her, and she just said, whatever my eunuch asked for. So,
Yeah,
same
kind
thing
of a
here.
similar, kind of points to her personality. Yeah.
Maybe also just the fortitude of doing that. So she basically just escaped death right now, and somehow she had the presence of mind to slow play this thing, which is that'd be tough.
Clever, for sure, yeah. Albert?
We have the end of the story to know, but when does he make his most rash decisions? When he's enthralled in a feast. So, like I said, it's supposition, don't have scripture, but he makes his most rash decisions when and if she needs a real strong, rash decision, that may be the premise. So.
Could be, yeah. I think she probably knows him pretty well by this point. They've been married for several years, so she kind of knows his temperament and plays this pretty well. So, yeah. I'm certain those 3 days of fasting, there was probably a lot of thought going into how this was going to go down and what she was going to do. So,
Known that she's a Jew at this point, in the broader sense, I would assume not.
nope,
So
not yet.
again, back to Brian's point, having a plan for even her kind of big reveal.
Yeah. Some thought went into this for sure. So, any other comments on this? Go ahead.
Well, if you haven't seen your husband in 30 days, it's probably a good idea to butter him up a little bit before you really ask for something that's important to you, right? So rebuilding and rekindling that relationship. And I think she's, again, to Brian's point, trying to plan this out. She wants Haman to be in the vicinity so that he can't deny what's going on. Because he's not here when she asks this. Because the next verse is, well, let's get Haman, let's get him here, let's go. So I think part of the plan has to be Haman's got to be around because he's integral to what I'm trying to do here.
It very well could be, yeah. It's not the plan that I certainly would have come up with myself. Like, you got the king alone. You can tell him, give him your complete side of the story without Haman being there to, maneuver and twist things. But we see how it works out here. But all right, let's go ahead and read the next few verses. Let's read 5 through 8. Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, "What is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half the half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled." Then Esther answered, "My wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Again, so this has got to be piquing Hazard's curiosity here, because how often do you think that someone has kept their, when he's offered them such a magnanimous gift, who would say, well, I'll tell you tomorrow, come back to the feast? Like, he's given you the gift. You think you'd take advantage of it right then and there. And now twice she has kind of played him here. It's interesting to note that the Hebrew word for the banquet here is mishete. And we saw that before. Where did we see that? Y'all remember? It's chapter 1, yeah. The very same word. You remember what it translates to? A drinking party. She's going to throw him a big drinking bash. So was it you that said, or maybe it was Albert, him making his rash decisions after he'd been drinking. We know he liked the wine, so this is definitely, this shows clear planning and forethought into what's going on here. So they send for Haman, and he repeats his offer of half the kingdom to her, and she invites him to another party. She does admit, though, that there is something she wants, right? So he's, what do you think he's thinking right now? Yeah. He's probably suspicious that she's got a big ask of him coming up. Why is she doing this? Why is she delaying her request? Any ideas? Some people think that maybe she was afraid, right? Maybe just kind of buying time to kind of build up some courage. I don't know. That's not my my take on it, but like I said, this whole thing kind of strikes to me as being well thought out and planned.
Because it seems providential, because when you get to the end of the book and you see how it plays out in the revealing of Haman's evil plots, the gallows are ready, and everything happens immediately. It's not protracted for a year like Haman had planned on annihilating the Jews.
I think that could be an element of it. Like, if this is going to be so important to the queen, he's so much more likely to grant it. He wants to please her. He's already offered half the kingdom to her. This could be her strategy to really get him to want to please her. So I think so. I think that may be a big part of it. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Mike.
But the uneasiness about going through with it, because I mean the human side going to come into it too.
Yeah.
This big of ask, she's going to be a little nervous about it. So I don't think we can dismiss that totally,
Yeah.
but I think all of it added together, as Brian was saying, is the providence of God how it was handled.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. I think there's without a doubt some apprehension here. It would only be natural, wouldn't it? But we see her, I think, execute this plan with courage. I think it's definitely, this is a kind of a script she's following, even with the fear and everything that goes along with that. Yeah, she could have been counseled by the eunuch. That's possible too. We don't know really what happened in those 3 days, but I suppose it could have happened. Yeah, why is he being summoned to the queen's party? So she's got everybody kind of wondering what's going on here. Yeah. It is interesting to me that clearly this is a book about the providence of God, and he's not mentioned in all, but we see Esther concocting this kind of elaborate plan, subterfuge, misdirection, trying to tip the scales in her favor here. It still, kind of boggles my mind why she didn't just lay it all out there. But, we get what we get, and obviously she knew something that we don't. So, all right. Any other comments about this section?
How much do you want to press your luck? Because it was all a question when she walked into his presence in the first place, whether he was going to allow her to even be there in the first place. So how much do you want to press your luck in one day versus let's put the harder part off until tomorrow?
Right. Maybe little baby steps to.
And we're talking about laws that can't be repealed. So when you're about to ask your husband, the king, to do something about a situation that he really can't do anything about because the law is irrevocable, again, it's a pretty big ask, like we've already said.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Him as you're done this because you're the one that's allowed this to happen.
Very good point.
So she's has to work this out. And
Right.
And whispered in my ear and said, and she's also setting up Haman. She can get him and those two separately in a place to say, here's what's happening. They're going to kill me. And there he sits.
Yeah, you can't just walk into the king and say, you sentenced us all to die, and this is all your fault, right? You've got to have a little bit of tact and a little bit of a plan of action here. So, all right, very good. Thank you for your comments. Let's move on. We're going to go ahead and read 9 through the end of the chapter here. And Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, sorry, I lost my place. When Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches and the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. Guy's got a lot of hate, doesn't he? Yeah. He's definitely latched on to Mordecai here. So yeah, he goes from being in a good mood, leaving that banquet, singled out as the only other man besides the king at the queen's feast, and completely oblivious to Esther's plan at this point. And who does he run into but the man he hates the most in the world? And what does Mordecai do? He continues to do what he's been doing, ignore him, right? And sends Haman into another rage. How petty can you get? You've just been singled out by the queen, you think, because it's for your great service and you're a favorite of hers, and just the mere sight of a enemy can send you spiraling in the other direction. So he gets his family and friends together. What do they suggest doing about it? Yeah. By hanging. Is this get a rope and string him up kind of hanging, or something different? Mm-hmm. So, from what I've read, this is not the hanging that we would typically associate hanging with. This is literal hanging him on a post and hoisting him up 50 cubits high. How high is 50 cubits? Anybody know? About 75 feet, yeah. So, yeah. Right. So this is like crucifixion or impalement, even, and hoisting him up 75 feet in your courtyard for you to wake up and admire over breakfast. So that kind of gives you some insight into how twisted this guy was. Just a tremendous amount of hate and rage. We see that pride where it's led this man. So, what are your thoughts on Haman so far? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He's let his worst impulses pretty much take control of his life here, huh? Yeah. Go ahead, H.E.
It's interesting how sin leads us down a path
Okay.
we can't recover from.
Some application. I was about to get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how would that apply to us? I mean, certainly, I don't think anybody here is in position of second in command of one of the greatest empires in history, but certainly see these kinds of bad character traits pop up in our life from time to time, can't we?
Mordecai, but he doesn't take physical action. His hate is so great on the first time, but then he goes after the entire nation. And here he is, he sees him, and it says indignation is the root word here for his wrath. And yet he restrains himself and goes to his family. So it's just a puzzling personality trait that I would ask of him.
Yeah, you wonder, like, what is this guy's thought process? Like, it seems kind of just totally without any kind of reason or rationality here.
He's not associated her to him, or her being Esther to Mordecai. Is that a stretch?
It seems that way to me, that people are totally oblivious as to Esther's heritage here. Yeah, Ian?
I just want to say the application I take from it is, you really are who you surround yourself with. And it seems like, not just from this example in the Bible, but probably every example, and even in modern day examples today with people in power, we talked about this before, they surround themselves with yes men, and they're not surrounding themselves with people who are challenging them, playing the devil's advocate, talking through things and finding the best decision. They're surrounding themselves with people that are going to let them do what they want to do. They know that. And as H.E. pointed out, sin begets more sin, and they just go deeper and deeper into sin, into darkness. And if they just surrounded themselves with a few people to, come with a counterpoint or balance them out, it could be a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. He's kind of fallen into the same trap that Xerxes himself is falling into by pulling in bad advisors and listening to people that obviously don't know what they're talking about.
I think another application we can make is we've got to keep steady and balanced, because Haman's a prime example. He that can go to extreme highs, as far as he was with, building up with the ego and I'm number two man, and are also capable of going to extreme lows. And I mean, in today's world, whether we're talking politicians, world leaders, whatever, normally you'll find that those that go to extreme highs are also capable of going to extreme lows. So that needs to teach us more to just, my old saying is just chill.
Yeah.
You know, just keeping that balance.
Yeah.
And it's not saying you've got to be boring or anything like that, but just stay away from the big pendulum swings, because that can cause problems and let sin come into your life, as somebody else was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, like if I find myself in some kind of situation where, I'm starting to get amped up, I mean, if you'll just take a minute, think about it, and think about your reaction to whatever you're dealing with. It usually ends better if you give yourself a moment's pause to kind of get under control. So,
how to manage my life when I don't have. And that's that evil living, that
right.
level playing.
All right. Well, again, we've kind of moved through the chapter pretty quickly here. I keep going back to thinking about how Esther has orchestrated all this, and maybe some lessons or ideas about that as it applies to our own life.
She had a harsh refusal to the king,
Hmm.
and Esther had 2 soft refusals to the king, and that got him curious, and I think he really wanted to please her. So it was all about how she handled it and how she told him no. She did essentially tell him no. She did not give him her request,
Right.
but she did it kind of in a roundabout, soft way.
It's an interesting contrast, isn't it? A good lesson for us, know your opponent, basically. We said that she's been queen now for a while, several years at this point, so she probably has a good idea who Xerxes is. Maybe she's tried this tactic before somehow in some lesser way, but it is interesting that you can kind of compare the 2 queens that way. All right, does anybody else have anything? Brad?
Proverbs 16:18 pride goeth before the fall. I mean, clearly in this instance, Haman was extraordinarily presumptuous and basically had no constraints upon what he thought he could do or get away with, even before a very capricious king who would lop heads off at a moment. And another thing I think of, it pertains to money, but I think it also pertains to power. But as it pertains to gaining wealth, this is enough is never enough, and you can never make too much money. And you can see stories of people who've squandered great wealth, seeking more wealth when it would have made no difference in their life. And in this instance, he had great power, and he sought even more, and out of pride, and it cost him his life.
Very good. KG?
We see many times with Xerxes, we see it with Mordecai. They're up and down with their emotions, and we have to learn to keep our emotions in check. I mean, you wouldn't know this, but I am a hothead sometimes. I mean, if you see me play basketball, you've seen it.
It's like, who's that guy?
But it's taken me several years to control that, because I was even more of a hothead way back there. So
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely a good lesson on temperance here. See what the opposite is and where it leads. So just like Mike was saying there. So, we're about 5 minutes out. That's pretty much all I got, unless we have some more discussion or ideas, or John or Robert.
Just one more. It's interesting that Job follows Esther. I mean, in the sequencing that we've got in the book here. And then you really understand the character, right? Because you've got Job that was presented with difficult circumstances. Haman could be argued he was presented with difficult circumstances, but they handle it completely differently. Even though they're to Ian's point, that they're both surrounded by bad advisors.
Yeah.
But Job steps up to the challenge, defends his position, gets corrected by God eventually, but
Yeah.
defends his position, and Haman completely goes the opposite end of that.
That's an interesting comparison. I never really thought about comparing the two, but yeah, that's absolutely right. So, yeah, there.
We also have to, I think about the fact that she is criticizing someone that he has raised up. He's raised up
Yeah.
Haman. He's also been deceived by her the whole time she's been there. He doesn't know she's a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
So she's considering all of that, I think, in taking this slower approach to telling him what she wants.
That's a great point too. There's a lot of I guess you spend 3 days fasting, not eating, and just totally focused on one idea. You're going to come up with a lot of little nuances and thoughts like that, like, oh, I got to be careful about this, and I got to be careful about this, and I think all these thoughts are running through her head as she's made this plan. So very good. Thank you. Yes. Excellent point. Yes. Yes. He has to kind of prod her a little bit here. I think that's definitely an application for us, like, spreading God's message or encouraging someone. It might take more than just that first initial conversation, not to give up on something that needs to be done if it doesn't work out right away. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, Albert.
Verse 11, and you look at what this world cherishes, and Haman recounted the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, how he advanced above the officials and the servants of the king, and even Queen Esther had invited him to the banquet. So those are still the same challenges today, 2022.
Yeah, certainly for each of us. We've all have major blessings. I mean, this guy has it all. Yeah.
But he would have given it all just to have vengeance.
Right.
So caught up in this world, what we consider, I have multiple sons, that's success. I have many promotions, and it's not. And I'm fortunate that I'm around brothers and sisters, and we study the word to realize that's not where our riches are.
Yeah, yeah. Total focus on the things that aren't important at all. Another failing of his. Well, that's pretty much all I've got for tonight. We're just a couple minutes from the bell, so we're going to pick up Sunday in chapter 6. John will be running that. We're halfway done, so just a few more classes. So thank you all for your comments tonight.